You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. Hey, what's going on, money makers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make more money. If you're new to the show, remember that we release brand new conversations with unconventional money makers every single day of the week. So you might be listening to this maybe on another device, another feed or something like that. So if you haven't yet, please be sure to go to your podcast app of choice right now. Follow the show, subscribe there so you never miss an opportunity to learn how to make some more money this year. While you're there, if you want to leave a quick rating and review, that would be awesome as well, because it really does help out the show tremendously. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about podcast guesting with my new friend, Alice Draper. Alice is the founder of the podcast guesting company, Hustling Writers, and the host of the podcast, My Rejection Story. She's on a mission to make publicity accessible by reframing rejection. Alice has secured her clients on countless podcasts, including most of the top 0.5% of shows that are on the market. It's going to be a cool conversation because this is also the business that I've been in for quite a few years. So we had a good little pre-recording convo about all of that stuff. But I like this as an idea for anybody that's listening because it's relatively simple to get started. And there's even now a bunch of different software companies that will give you the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, and allow you to kind of run this in a really efficient way and give you some meat on the bone, give you some money to make. So Alice Draper, what's up? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Travis. I'm excited to be here. And thank you for the great introduction.
Of course. So tell me how you made your first dollar ever, Alice, and then we'll go into what you're doing now.
My first dollar ever was probably made at the market day in my primary school. I look back, I never thought was into entrepreneurship. When I look back at my childhood, I clearly was, because I took any opportunity to sell things to people and ran with it. So at the market day, I trialed many products, from hot dogs to cupcakes to things I bought from a China shop and resold at the school. In fact, no, actually, even before that, before there was a market day at the school, I convinced my dad, my aftercare, I convinced my dad to let me buy like a giant pack of chips, where you can like get from like a wholesale shop, like a
Yeah.
bag of chips that has tons inside. I was like 6 years old at this point, and I went to my school aftercare and sold them. And the teachers found out and said, "You're not allowed to do this," because like obviously it's like unregulated stuff being sold at the school. So then I like snuck into a corner and carried on selling, and then they found me there, and I got in trouble for selling the chips. But I got such a high from selling things at the age of 6 years old.
Yeah, and then they created a market day just for you. That's what
So
I'm
no, that was
hearing.
my next school. So as I got older, the next school had a market day, and you had to apply for a license. And obviously, I
Oh,
like
gotcha.
jumped on that because
That's cool
there's
though.
opportunities to sell. Yeah.
That's super cool though. It gives you the opportunity to kind of learn that process, that you're going to have to go get a license. You have to do this legitimately. There's some checks and balances here, especially as it relates to food products that we're going to have to make you go through if you're going to make money off of it. But then to go through all of that and then just sit there and actually sell stuff, that's super cool. What do you remember what your best selling product was?
Yes, I do. So we didn't just have to, like, we were allowed to sell other things, not just food products. And the best-selling product, which was very short-lived, was, I don't know if you've ever seen, but in glass like jars, sometimes people have these like rubber balls. I don't know how to explain it. Like there are
Mm.
these little balls that people fill up glass. It's usually to fill up vases as decor in the house. But in primary school, my primary school would go through these trends where something becomes very popular, like marbles are very popular for this month. So at this point of the school, these things, which we labeled as squishies, I think they have a different word, were very
Huh.
popular, and everyone was trading them and trying to get their hands on them. And people hadn't quite figured out the supply yet. And I actually noticed, this is terrible. I learned a lesson about stealing. I noticed that someone was selling them, and she was selling them in a Tupperware, like for with five or so. And I went to her and asked her where did she buy them from, and she told me where she bought them from. And I went to this supplier and I bought a bunch of bags. And so they came as like little like there's like hundreds of them in a bag, and then you put it
Yeah.
in water and it expands and it makes hundreds. So I went home
I
and
know. I know
made
exactly what you're talking about now. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember what the actual word is. In school, we call them squishies. I don't remember what,
I mean, that's a
terminology
pretty
is.
good term for it. I think most people would know what that is. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so I went home and made hundreds and then came to school and sold it. And they sold like just our stall was buzzing. And so I was a kid. I made like 50x what I paid because I paid like probably like the equivalent of $1 for all 5 bags. So my
Nice.
like cost was $1 and I made like what would have been probably like came home with like probably about like equivalent of like $50. I was like 10 years old.
Nice.
And I thought that I was going to be so rich. And then by the next week, everyone was over it and no one wanted to buy them anymore. And I'd like
Oh
doubled my
no.
supply, but the school had moved on. They weren't interested.
So always kind of entrepreneurial growing up.
Looking back, yes. Yeah, and I feel like I got into business by accident. I never considered myself an entrepreneur when I started out.
Oh, really?
But when I look at my childhood, I'm like, clearly, this was always something I was into.
How did you start out in entrepreneurship then?
So when I was in university, I was freelancing as a writer, and I was making probably working like 5 to 10 hours a week. But I studied in South Africa, and by the time I graduated with a creative degree, I quickly realized that the job industry was going to pay me less than I was already earning with like 5 to 10 hours.
Hmm.
So it just didn't make financial sense to get a job. And then so it was a practical reason to kind of go out on my own, but then I quickly realized that I loved it and that I don't think I could be hired. I don't think I would be someone that fits in
So
the
have you
traditional
ever
job.
had a job then?
I've never had a real job.
Never had a
Not,
real
I mean, I've
job.
worked part-time for companies and stuff, but I've
Yeah,
never had
like
nine
contract
to five.
basis though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I've never had like a real 9 to 5. Closest I
Yeah.
got to that was maybe internships I did while I was studying, where I went to the office every day for 8 hours a day.
Yeah. So you were more doing like gigs
Yeah,
and then freelancing and kind of solopreneurship.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So tell me how you got into podcast guesting.
By accident. I was freelance. Most of my income at that point was through freelance writing, and I
Like
was
writing,
working.
like creative writing or copywriting.
A mixture. So journalism, part of it was that I was pitching media publications like HuffPost, Vice, Refinery 29, and so I
Okay.
was getting bylined pieces in those magazines. And then I also was doing copywriting, and that's actually how I got into podcast guesting because I was working with some coaches and they noticed that I was getting byline stuff, and so they asked me, "Can you help us get byline stuff? Could
Hmm.
you also help us get onto podcasts?" And I said, well, I've never pitched a podcast before, but it can't be that different from pitching other media. So yeah, I just figured it out. And then that quickly became the thing that I they were most enjoyed about me. I was working, a friend of mine had started like an agency for like a full service media. So she was doing like the websites and the social media and everything for his clients, but they quickly became most interested in the earned media, that they were more interested in that than anything else that was being done. And that friend decided to she had a fallout with her partner and she decided to go do something else. So she shuttered the agency and then she just referred all the clients to me. And then they
Hmm.
referred more people. And suddenly I kind of like had legs to have my own business.
Yeah, keep bringing on clients. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's kind of make this super practical for anybody listening. So, essentially, what this service is it's PR, but it's directly for a podcast. And what's happened is a lot of authors, entrepreneurs, small business owners, people who have a message to share with the world are always looking for ways to get attention to that message. And there's been a shift probably in the last 5 years, especially, but probably 10 years where it started happening, where podcasts have been a greater form of PR than going on, a morning show to promote your book or something like that. In fact, a friend of mine, Jordan Harbinger, has a massive podcast, and there's one of the testimonials on his sponsor pages of Tim Ferriss saying that the Jordan Harbinger show is responsible for selling more copies of my books than Good Morning America, MSNBC, and something else combined.
Very
And
easy.
so I think a lot of the attention's moving there, especially as it relates to something like books, because the podcast audiences tend to be more well informed. They tend to be higher education. They tend to be higher income. They tend to be people who are looking for self improvement things, and so book sales can correlate with podcast guesting quite a bit. So what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years is all these agencies are popping up, like mine and like Alice's, where people pay us to go secure them interviews on podcasts, just like her and I are doing right now. And so there's a big space, like there's a lot of room for other people to come into the space, because there's a lot of different niches that you can own in certain categories. And we're just talking about this before we hit the record button, but you don't have to build a multi-million-dollar agency here to be able to make some decent money. If you just have strong relationships with 20 to 40 solid shows in one specific category, you can build a six-figure business, right, Alice? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think also, being being able to build once you've got those first clients, I think that was the big thing with us is once you have those first clients, the word of mouth takes over, and
Mhm.
yeah, that
Yeah, it just kind of keeps funneling new business into the company. What were your first steps? Like, if somebody's listening, they're like, okay, that sounds cool, but even if I had a client, I wouldn't know what to do with them. Like, where do you find podcasters? What do you say to them? How do you get their attention?
first steps would be learning how to pitch. I think you probably agree with that. So the first steps, I think, is getting really good at writing a good email pitch, and then from there, figuring out who to pitch. One of the things that we found works really well is tracking other people in the space. So, for example, if the client is in the kind of workplace space or something, we would find a thought leader who is quite a bit ahead of them,
Hmm.
speaking to that same audience, speaking on very similar topics, and just track all the media they've been doing and use that trail to essentially pitch that.
Hmm.
Or pitch friends of theirs who are ahead of them, because then we can even mention the relationship in the pitches and
Yeah, yeah. I
the
like I
connection.
like the credibility piece in the pitches. I think helps a lot.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody that's similar to a thought leader that this person had on recently, you can just kind of be like, I noticed you had so and so on your show. Maybe you
Yeah.
might be interested in this person because they have, this thing and this thing and this thing, and here's the thing that differentiates them from that other person. But yeah, I really like this as a potential way for people to make some more money. There's even like software out there now, like Matchmaker, Podmatch, My Software Guestio, that make it even easier to go find these shows that are actively raising their hand and saying like, hey, I'd like some guests. You know what I mean? Even podcastguest.com has a list of shows now that you can that are constantly looking for guests to come on. And there's always levels to this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're talking to somebody who's really affluent and who has a lot of money, but also has already done a lot of media, maybe it can be a little bit more difficult because they're only going to want to get on shows that are like massive shows, and those shows are just way more difficult to land. But there's an
Yeah.
entire swath of people, an entire segment who are just looking to get started doing more media, and they just are happy to be on whatever show you present to them. And there's a lot of shows out there that need good guests. And so if you're talking to somebody who knows what they're doing, they're knowledgeable in the area that they're an expert in, there's shows that want that person. So you can be kind of be the go-between person that does all the legwork to introduce those two people, and then you can charge $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, something like that, to actively be placing these people on shows. And the nice thing is, like, if you're doing a lot of the work, the majority of it's profit. It doesn't require you to go advertise. It doesn't require you to spend a lot of money. It doesn't require you to build a massive team. If you're doing this kind of like freelance work and working with like a small boutique agency, you can do the majority of the heavy lifting yourself, but it can turn into pretty significant income pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And to your point about using those apps, I actually recommend people go to like softwares like yours when they're getting started rather than investing, because when you want to build up those interviews, you want to have like a portfolio when you do pitch the big shows. you want to get clear on your messaging. So you want to actually have spoken on a bunch of podcasts to
Yeah,
practice sharing your message. And also it's great for collecting backlinks for SEO. You don't have to be on big podcasts to start collecting that SEO footprint.
that's exactly right.
But
Yeah. If you look
yeah,
at, even if you look at like my stuff, Alice, like when I started all of this, if you searched my name in Google, like I'm not even sure my website would have popped up on page one. You know what I mean? Like there was just nothing to be found on Traps Chapel. Now, if you search my name, you have a bunch of my stuff on page one, but if you look at page two, page three, page four, page five, literally up to like page 12, it's just a trailing library of the hundreds and hundreds of podcast appearances that I've done over the last few years. What I tell people is it's like it acts as just kind of a punch in the face of credibility. Like you can't help but like look at all of those and be like, okay, well, I've never heard of this guy before, but it seems like he's been around the block. It
yeah.
seems like people want to associate him. It seems like people value his expertise, or he wouldn't have 12 pages of Google full of different interviews. And if you get lucky, it might even be interviews with people that person already knows, likes, and trusts, which will increase that trust factor immediately as well. So there's a ton of reasons for people to do this. And if you can kind of just be that person that's the go-between, you can turn this into like significant income. And like I said, it can be a side hustle. You make $1,000, $2,000 a month. You have one or two clients, or it could turn into a full-time freelancing gig where you're doing the majority of the work and it's bringing you, 8-9 grand a month in profit. Or you can scale it and turn it into a 7-figure business if you want to. There's a lot of meat on the bone there, and there's not a shortage of people that are looking to get placed on podcasts. The only problem to me in the space now is that there's more of a shortage of podcasts than anything else. There's a stat that I was reading recently, Alice, and that was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. So since 2020, which is around the time where both of us started doing this, the total number of podcasts has more than doubled. So we're coming up on like 5 million index podcasts now in Spotify and Apple. While that has almost doubled or more than doubled, the total number of active podcasts has only increased by like 15-20%. So it might have been like 350,000 active in 2020. Now it's like 430,000 active. It's like the total number of active podcasts has actually remained about the same. So that's the only thing about the industry, is that like the available inventory is much lower than it used to be. But that's also why I say that like I think that there's a lot of room for these kind of like niche agencies to pop up that are just like, we serve fitness coaches only. You know what I mean? And like because we have relationships with 40 good fitness podcasts. But if you have those relationships, there's somebody out there in that expertise that will use you over anybody else, because like you have these relationships on lock, they're secure. You know what I mean? And so if you can be the one with those relationships, those shows will actively start looking for your pitches in their inbox, right? So you're a podcaster. How many pitches do you get from companies like ours on a monthly basis for people trying to get on your podcast?
Oh my gosh, so many, and they just so many of them are so bad. I think I like actually have flagged all the good ones because they're so rare. It's like I want
They are.
to notice, I'm like, okay, what are you up to that you're sending good pictures? Because most of them I just, yeah, totally don't. And that's what I also often say to people when it comes to pitching themselves, because I also train a lot of my clients to pitch themselves, is I'm like, it's really not hard to stand out in the market when you
Yeah.
see the quality of pitches coming through. Like I'd say like 3 very simple things you can do to differentiate your pitches and easily be at the top 1% of the pitches landing in people's inboxes.
Yeah, and there's another great software too that was recently launched by a guy who we had here on the show. It's called Pod Pitch, and
Mm.
it is powered by AI. It's more expensive. Like if you look at like Podmatch and some of those other ones, they're like $7-8 a month, something like that, $20 a month. Whereas this one's more like a kind of like a CRM email sender that also helps generate copy from like through generative AI and things like that, and then helps you prioritize pitches and things like that. So it does a lot more work for you, but it is a couple $100 a month, I want to say. But even if you're looking to like pitch yourself, or maybe you have an assistant or a VA on your team that you believe to be highly capable, even something like that would give you a leg up and enable you to start getting on some shows without having to drop a ton of cash up front.
Yeah, yeah. And something else that can be really helpful is training ChatGPT to get you started. So, what I've found works really well with ChatGPT is I'll share a very good pitch, like it was one of the pitches we've written before. And then I'll share all the notes from a call with the clients. And I'll say, please take those notes and turn it into a pitch following the exact same style as
Hmm.
this. Make sure it's story driven. Make sure you do this. They'll send me something. It's not quite what I want. So I'll kind of go back and forth a few times saying, like, shorten it, add something like this. But by the end, like the product is still better than anything else in the market. And so that's
Yeah.
like we'd go through, just for most of the pitches. So we'd go through, I'd basically rewrite it for my retainer clients, but for people who are, figuring us out on their own, it's really a strong starting point if you train ChatGPT right.
Now, you started My Rejection Story, which is your own podcast. Did this come after you were doing podcast guesting or before?
Yeah, yeah. So this was only last year in September.
Okay.
As you know, Travis, there's a lot of work that goes into running your own podcast
Oh,
versus
yes.
going on other people's.
Oh, yeah.
So it took me a while to be ready to make the plunge and the commitment to running my own show. But
Yeah, I told
yeah,
somebody
I'm loving
that
it.
last week. They were talking about starting their own podcast, and I was like, "How many shows have you been on as a guest?" And they were like, "Zero." And I was like, "Okay, before you move into the epic commitment of time, energy, and money that it is to have your own show, let's get you booked on some shows first. Let's just see, because you might get on some shows and be like, this sucks. I don't like this one bit. And if that's you, then you probably shouldn't move forward with running your own show because it's way more difficult. So I always tell people, like, let's go get you booked on 10, 15, 20 podcasts first. See how you like that. Do you enjoy the format? Do you have a lot of things to say? Does it come somewhat naturally to you, or do you find that it's fighting an uphill battle and something that you don't want to do? And it can be a really great way just to dip your toe in the water to see if you enjoy the medium. And then you can start your own show, just because, like you said, it is a much bigger commitment of time, energy, money, everything to have your own show. How have you found running your show now, Alice? How do you like it?
I love it. And I think that that's the only reason why I'm committed to it. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
what I always say when it comes to running your own shows. I would think you need to be pretty into it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll probably be part of that podcast burnout statistic of a show that never goes past 10 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I love the conversations. I feel like I'm doing intense market research on people that fascinate me. So I get so much just from the interviews that I'm not too focused on the metrics, which is allowing me to be sustainable. Um, but yeah, I've been really enjoying it. It's a game, it's a puzzle. I feel
Yeah.
like there's always new things to experiment with and try out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Alice, thanks so much for doing this. So this is there you have it, everybody listening. I mean, this is the blueprint to starting your own podcast guesting agency, something that you can do in your free time, start out on just the side, build into freelancing, grow it into an agency, do whatever you want. But there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of automation tools that make it much easier than it was even when Alice and I started just 4 or 5 years ago. So if you are interested in doing that, reach out to Alice. Tell her you heard about it here on the show. See if she's got some tips and tricks for you. Alice, where can people go to get more from you?
If you want to see a template of a podcast pitch that could work well, you can go to my website, which is hustlingwriters.com/templates, and you can grab the template that we use in-house.
Great.
Otherwise, you can check us out on the website. You can find me on LinkedIn, Alice Draper. You can find the podcast, My Rejection Story, on Apple Podcasts
Hustling
or on all the
Writers,
podcast apps.
hustlingwriters.com/template
Yes,
to go get
correct.
the exact template that they use. Please do that, by the way. Like, this is somebody who's sent thousands of pitches and learned how to refine a really, really good one that actually works. So hustlingwriters.com/template to go get that. Go check out My Rejection Story wherever you listen to podcasts. Alice, thanks so much for doing this. Everybody else listening, tuning in, remember that money only solves your money problems, but it's a little bit easier to solve the rest of your problems with some money in the bank. So let's solve that problem first here on the Travis Makes Money podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. Peace out.